Lee Cronin's The Mummy is not the fourth entry in the Brendan Fraser franchise. That is still in pre-production. That is 2 years away. And my girlfriend was very disappointed when she found out we were not seeing that movie. This is a new Blumhouse pure horror take on the classic Universal monster. But I was actually really looking forward to this movie. The only thing I've seen from Lee Cronin so far is Evil Dead Rise. That was a sequel I had almost zero faith in when I went into that theater. But once I saw it, I was like, oh wow, this is actually really good. It has a lot of really good messed up imagery. A lot of it is burned into my brain, and I know a lot of people say that all the time. I have some pretty bad memory loss issues, I feel like. So when something from a horror movie stays in my head, it is something that left a lasting impression. And this was a director I was looking forward to seeing whatever he did next. And look, Evil Dead Rise was really good. I don't know if it's put the director's name in the title of the movie good. So this fits in the non-cinematic universe with the newer Invisible Man and the newer Wolfman movie. They're not actually connected. It's not like they're building out a cinematic universe here. At least they're not doing that yet. But each one has done a distinct swing at the thing, even if not all of them worked. Like, I actually missed Wolfman. I didn't hear the best things about it, but I thought the Invisible Man movie was pretty solid, and I had a lot of faith in this version of The Mummy. And after seeing it for myself and sitting on it for about 24 hours now, this is the first movie in a while where I am truly mixed on it. There's a lot of great things in this movie. There's a lot of things that if you were a 16-year-old at a sleepover, you and your friends are going to be terrified. But there are just some choices here that it feels like when the movie was pitched, we had the best pitch ever for a new Mummy movie. But by the time the credits roll on this final cut of the movie, you just have this weird feeling that there's some sort of wasted potential here. But at the same time, it doesn't waste all of the potential, which is why I'm so mixed on this entire thing. And sometimes those are my favorite movies to talk about. So without spoiling anything, let's talk about Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Because in this version of The Mummy, I actually like the setup of the story. You have this American family of 4 living in Cairo because the father is a news reporter, and at some point during this lease, the daughter ends up going missing. And even after reporting everything to the police, they spend some time trying to find Katie. They just can't find her. She is long gone. So the story flashes forward 8 years, where the family now has another young daughter with their now teenage son living in Albuquerque, and they finally get a call that Katie is alive. And when you see her, she looks fucking terrible. And one of the reasons I was so interested in this film was because of that setup. I just think it's a really refreshing take on this kind of monster movie. Like, having your kid be the mummy is a crazy pitch for a studio, but I think that makes the whole family dynamic a lot more interesting, because you have these parents that have been grieving for 8 years because they pretty much lost hope that their daughter is still alive. So when they find out that she is like alive but not really, that's like a lot to take in, and it builds this interesting dynamic, especially between the two parents, of like what they should do about the situation. And it makes you feel bad not only for the parents, not only for the brother and sister and the people taking care of her, but like Katie herself. You're like, holy shit, this is a lot to go through. And it's not like the movie goes overboard where you're supposed to like feel bad for the mummy. It's just one of those dynamics that adds a layer of like, oh man, that kind of sucks. And I think from the jump, that was a great decision. But when you make that choice, you put the entire film on the shoulders of one child actor. If that performance flops, the entire movie is going to fail. Nobody is going to buy into your movie. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I think Natalie Grace is absolutely awesome in this role. She is an absolute freak from the second the sarcophagus opens up. And a lot of that does have to do with the makeup. I think the makeup in the movie is really impressive. I thought some of the work they did on her face didn't look the best when it was like moving around. It almost made it look like they CGI'd her face a little bit. But everything else, like when it's close up, if you see a close up of her arms or like the toenails, it just looks so nasty. And I say that as a compliment for a movie like this. And it's not just her. Like, there are a lot of nasty things in this movie, man, which didn't fully surprise me, because going off of Evil Dead Rise, like, I knew that was part of the appeal of that movie, was there was a lot of fun gore. And I don't like hate a horror movie. Like, if that's the direction you want to go, where you're going to gross people out, it's not my favorite, but I don't like hate on the movie because of that. My girlfriend would heavily disagree with that take, but I could handle a good amount of this kind of stuff. Like, unless the gore is completely over the top, I'm not going to be too bothered by it. But when it comes to like puking, that is just not my kink. And there is a lot of puking in this movie, and there's different types of it too, which really threw me off. And it happens just enough times where it got to a point where I just asked myself, like, am I having fun right now? And I think the answer is no. But if you take all of that out, there are a lot of horror moments here that I think really deliver on what you want when you go to see a horror movie. Like, I've never made a horror movie, but I think if you're going in to make one, there has to be at least one part where you're like, man, have I ever seen anyone do that in a horror movie? And a lot of times the answer is no. But when the answer is yes, I just have to give you credit because they do something with a scorpion in the final act of this movie. And when it happens, I was like, I can't believe what I'm watching right now. This is just ridiculous, but it's great. I feel like Cronin is one of those guys that is always thinking about that, of trying to one-up himself, of trying to think of crazy things that haven't been put on screen in a horror movie. And I really respect that a lot. And that's the thing. Like, I think when you go into a horror movie, the most important part is, did you have a fun time or did it scare you? And I think in that regard, Lee Cronin's The Mummy definitely delivers on that. And it does give you like an actual kind of interesting story. So then you're probably sitting here like, Chase, man, then what went wrong with this entire thing? And that's where this mixed bagness of the movie comes in for me personally. Like, I do think a lot of it comes down to the editing of the whole thing. But before I get into that, I have to talk about my other negative, which I have to admit, I don't know how you fix this, but I just feel like when you're doing a hard take on The Mummy, I wanted just something that felt a little bit different. Because even though I do think the performance is there, it just feels like for the past, I don't know, like 50, 60 years, we've had like children that are possessed by demons, right? And I just thought you had an opportunity to try something a little bit different since this is like a mummy. Whereas in the movie, it just feels like you're watching The Exorcist, but the skin looks worse on the poor girl. You know what I mean? And in the filmmaker's defense, like I said, I don't know what the answer or solution to that problem is, but at the same time, that's why I am not the one making the new Mummy movie. And I get that if you did the mummy cliche and she's walking around the house all slow, it would probably look stupid. I get why you wouldn't want to go that route, but I just feel like there's another answer. Like if there's one more good brainstorm, everything would have just fallen into place. And I do think they do a pretty good job at developing like the lore of this version of the Mummy. And even though when they're describing the lore, it feels like you've seen this thing a bunch of times before, I still think it delivers. Like it's still a pretty interesting thing. And there's a huge chunk of the movie that takes place in Cairo, which I thought was actually probably the most interesting parts of the movie. And that's really where you get a lot of, not necessarily the lore dumps, but like build up of the mystery. And I thought it was all well done. It made the movie feel like you weren't just watching another American Blumhouse movie. Like it really took that side of the story like pretty seriously. And I do like what they do with the family dynamics with this Mummy. I just thought all the stuff in Egypt was so much more interesting. And I wanted more of that side of the story. But like I said, the real thing that is holding this movie back from being really good is the editing of the entire thing. I think it's at its worst when it's ruining the tension of a lot of these scary scenes. And I think the prime example for me is really early on when Katie actually gets kidnapped. There's just a really good setup for a really good scary scene. Like you could tell if you were on set that day, you're like, yeah, I don't want to be here. It just feels really icky and uncomfortable. And I like that. You want that in a horror movie. But then once the scene starts playing out, we get this choppy, jump cutty kind of Blumhouse editing with all these little added effects. And it just makes the whole thing come off too goofy. And you never want that in a horror movie. And when the movie isn't cutting out the tension, it's cutting out the pacing of the story. Because this movie is just over 2 hours, I think. I feel like it's around 2 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. And man, it feels like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I felt like I was sitting there for the length of The Dark Knight. It was crazy. Like there are multiple times in this movie where you're like, okay, we're finally getting to the end. Like this is going to start wrapping up. And then there's like 35 more minutes. And you're like, I can't believe I'm still sitting here. And I always hate that feeling, probably more than any feeling when I watch a movie, if I'm being honest. Like there are good story beats happening throughout the movie, but when it feels like you are just dragging yourself at a snail's pace to get to those like really good moments, it just takes out a lot of the excitement for me personally. And like every other Blumhouse horror movie, of course there's jump scares. And I gotta be honest, at this point, it feels dumb talking about a movie having jump scares because they all do it. But the problem I have with them in this movie, where there are so many good scares where it doesn't rely on a jump at all, it just makes the rest of the jump scares feel even more unnecessary. It's like, man, you are doing such an effective job at scaring me with everything else that you don't need to build up to a loud boom to make everyone jump. Like it just feels so pointless in a movie like this. But again, that's like a whole Blumhouse issue that is never going to change. And those things aren't enough for me to call Lee Cronin's The Mummy a bad movie. I really don't think it's that. I had a decent time with it, but it just feels like anything over 2 hours for a horror movie, you need to justify it with a great story. And I do think there was a good story here. It just drags out certain scenes to the point where you're like, man, I kind of want to go home film, and you don't really want that from a horror movie. But all that being said, I'm still excited to see what Lee Cronin does next. I think he's a really exciting horror filmmaker right now. I don't think it's as good as Evil Dead Rise. I have to see some of his other work. I'm excited to see what he does next. I think, honestly, if you're somebody that's just looking for a fun time to see a horror movie at the theater, or if you're having some friends over in the summer and you want to watch a spooky movie at night, I think this movie delivers on exactly that kind of experience that you want. And I can see a lot of people having a really fun time because of that. I don't think this is like one of the worst movies of the year. I just think for me, with all the stuff it does so well, it makes everything that it does so wrong so frustrating. And for me personally, that puts me at like a 5 out of 10. And if honestly, it's probably the highest 5 out of 10 I could give. Like, it's really teetering on 6. I want to call this a solid movie, but I just can't because I'd be lying. But I want to know from you in the comment section down below. Did you like this movie? Did you hate this movie? It seems like it's getting a very mixed reaction, and I kind of agree with both sides. What is your favorite version of The Mummy so far in cinematic history? There's a lot of options. And if you're a fan of me and my movie takes, we got plenty more coming. I'm going to be talking about Undertone very soon. That's actually my favorite horror movie of the year so far, and I can't wait to break down why that is. But either way, this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.